Do you ever think about dinner to optimize your fast? Often, breakfast is talked about because it is breaking your fast. What you eat for breakfast is very important to optimize your fast. But what about dinner? This is the pre-fasting meal. That is not something often talked about. Japanese fasting technique. Boost autophagy with these dinner foods. That's something I'm going to talk about today, so stick around. Hi, my name is Hachiaki Takamiya, a 63-year-old biohacker based on Japanese natural health and the author of Live Wiser, Not Smarter. In the last video, I said that I wouldn't eat steak and eggs for breakfast, but I would eat this for lunch. And I would not eat this for dinner either because the timing isn't good. Yes, timing is everything. And also in the last video, I shared with you what you do around your fast, such as evening routine for the optimal gut reset and morning routine for the optimal gut reset, including you want to exercise in the morning before breakfast. That is the key. And of course, what to eat for breakfast to optimize that reset. In other words, how to break your fast. And at the end of the video, I said I was going to share what to eat for dinner to optimize gut reset in the next video because dinner is your last meal before your fast. And then I say this time autophagy activation becomes the key. What is autophagy? Autophagy is a cellular recycling mechanism critical for longevity. If you want to increase your health span, you want to activate autophagy as much as possible to repair your cell damages. So today, I'll share with you Japanese fasting technique how to prepare for your fast, pre-fasting meal protocol. So first, I'll share with you pros and cons of 12-hour fasting, and then the fasting quality becomes critical, post-fasting meal versus pre-fasting meal, gut resetting versus autophagy activation, what to eat for dinner to prepare for gut reset, what to eat for dinner to boost autophagy, and finally, what not to eat for dinner. So please watch the video until the end. For those of you who just discovered this video today, this is the Ikigai diet channel, which is about how to increase health span for people over 50 or 60. I am the author of 4 books. I usually cover things like diet, exercise, mindset, and anything else that is related to increasing health span. So if you're over 50 or 60 and interested in health span extension, please subscribe to this channel. Thank you. Okay, pros and cons of 12-hour fasting. Now, I say the Japanese centenarians in Kyotango don't practice regular intermittent fasting, such as 16-hour fasting. They practice 12-hour fasting. And I shared with you this autophagy expert called Dr. Tamotsu Yoshimori. He is the leading authority on autophagy research in Japan. And in fact, he is the co-researcher of Dr. Osumi, who won the Nobel Prize in 2016 about autophagy. So in many ways, Dr. Tamotsu Yoshimori is the autophagy expert. And I shared with you his routine. He finishes dinner somewhere around 7:30, so he has about 12 hours of fasting. Also, I've shared with you about those Japanese doctors before about chokatsu, which means gut workout, and they didn't recommend breakfast skipping. And a few days ago, I watched their video, and then now they are recommending 12-hour fasting. Even in the West, Dr. Boto Longo, he talked about there is solid research on the benefit of 12-hour fasting. I mean, he usually promotes something he calls fasting mimicking diet, which he recommends that people practice like maybe twice a year or something. But generally speaking, he thinks 12-hour fasting is the easiest way for most people to do. But 16-hour fasting is a little risky because you may have nutritional deficiency. Okay, so is a 12-hour fast the best fasting protocol? Okay, so let's talk about pros and cons. What about pros? You can have 3 meals a day. That is important. So you will not have nutritional deficiency, which is often a drawback of practicing intermittent fasting. And then you get to have breakfast, which is considered to be the most important meal. And you can align yourself with a circadian rhythm. And it is easy to practice. So probably this is the most doable method. In fact, this is not even fasting. All you need to do is to have dinner early and maybe have breakfast slightly later, like 1 hour after waking up or something. Then you can practice 12-hour fasting. It's very easy. It is something most people can do. So what about cons? The cons is it's not long enough. Most people agree as a fasting method, it is not long enough. You will not get a kind of gut resetting or autophagy activation that you would get from regular intermittent fasting. The minimum length is considered to be 16 hours. Sometimes you need more, maybe 18 hours, 24 hours or longer, but minimum is 16 hours. And as long as you're practicing 16 hours, you can gain a lot of benefit that is often talked about from fasting. Basically, it is a trade-off situation. The reason why people are promoting 12-hour fasting is not because this is the most optimal approach. It is the easiest. And if you compare the pros and cons, probably this is the best method. For the practical point of view, probably this is the best, but it is not the most optimal method. And therefore, I recommended some alternative approaches. One is practicing 16 hours fasting, but not every day, like a few times a week. And if you practice fasting just once a week, instead of practicing 16 hours of fasting, you can practice prolonged fasting. Or you can practice 14 hours of fasting with 3 meals. That is something recommended by Dr. Sachin Panda, who is a circadian rhythm expert. So if you finish dinner at 7 p.m. and if you wait breakfast until 9 a.m., you have the 14 hours of fasting. But people who are working, like having a regular job, it's kind of difficult to practice because you cannot have breakfast at 9 a.m. It's too late. You need to have your breakfast at 7 or 8. So for some people, it's not practical. In that case, you can do regular, like 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. or 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., 12 hours of fasting. But to practice 12 hours fasting, the fasting quality becomes critical. You want to optimize fasting as much as possible. And what you do around your fast is important. So, what to eat for dinner to improve the fasting quality? Pre-fasting regimen. Okay, so post-fasting meal versus pre-fasting meal. Post-fasting meal is a breakfast and pre-fasting meal is dinner. For post-fasting meal, you are breaking your fast. Therefore, you need to provide deficient nutrient, especially PPP, protein, prebiotics, and probiotics. Also, you need to think about preventing blood sugar spike, but you don't need to think about autophagy so much. Remember autophagy, which is a cellular recycling mechanism critical for longevity. Because autophagy activation happens during fasted state. But when you have breakfast, once you eat something, you are in a fed state. And that will continue for the next, I don't know, 10, until you go to sleep, basically, because you'll have a lunch in about 3 hours time. And after lunch, and then maybe 4 hours later or 3 hours later, you have dinner. So you'll be in a fed state for a long time. So whatever you eat for breakfast does not affect your autophagy activation immediately. Therefore, you don't need to think so much about autophagy activating food for your breakfast. And pre-fasting meal, dinner, unlike breakfast, which is breaking your fast, this time you're preparing for your fast. And you want to synchronize sleep, fasted state, and autophagy activation. Autophagy is usually activated during sleep, and it is activated during your fasted state. But some people, sleeping time and fasted state are not matched. If you eat dinner just before going to sleep, probably you will not be in a fasted state until you wake up the next morning. So while you're sleeping, you are in a fed state. That's not something you want. So you want to align the sleeping time and fasted state as much as possible. Therefore, eat dinner early enough. And practicing hara hachibunme becomes more important. You don't want to eat too much because more you eat, it takes longer to digest food. Therefore, you will not become a fasted state much later. So saying eat breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, and dinner like a pauper is actually good. So this time you're preparing for your gut reset and preparing for autophagy activation. So that is one big difference from the breakfast. Okay, so gut resetting versus autophagy activation, how those two are different. So gut reset, the microbial changes undergo significantly during a fasted state. So, you know the transition of the bacteria in your gut, there are some beneficial bacteria, harmful bacteria, depending on what you eat, their composition change. And this change happens during your fasted state. And it also happens during sleep. That is why you want to synchronize fasted state and sleep as much as possible. And so does autophagy activation, cellular recycling. It happens during sleep and it happens during a fasted state. So, what to eat to prepare for the gut reset? So remember, to reset your gut, you need to think about beneficial bacteria and harmful bacteria. You want to feed beneficial bacteria, but you don't want to feed harmful bacteria. Therefore, eat food like fiber and fermented foods to feed beneficial bacteria, but do not eat processed food because that can feed harmful bacteria. So what to eat to prepare for autophagy activation? There are certain foods that can activate autophagy, such as natto, cheese, mushrooms, green tea, red wine, and so on. Natto, cheese, and mushrooms contain spermidine, and shrimp or salmon contain astaxanthin, and green tea contains catechin. Pomegranate contains lecithin A, and red wine contains resveratrol. So you want to eat these foods for dinner. However, among them, there are certain foods that I recommend, and there are some foods that I don't recommend. So first food that I recommend is natto. Yes, definitely natto, because natto is one of the foods that contains the highest amount of spermidine. So natto contains about 6.5 to 34 milligram of spermidine per 100 gram of natto, while aged cheese contains about 3.9 to 20 milligram per 100 grams. And then mushrooms, 6.7 to 12 milligram per 100 gram. Also, natto contains natto kinase, which is wonderful to intake at dinner time so that you can make it work during your sleep to stop the blood clotting at night. And there's so many other benefits. I won't go into the health benefit of natto today, but for details, please watch my other video. I regret ignoring natto, 7 health benefits you need to know. The next food that I recommend is salmon or shrimp. They contain astaxanthin. Then I also recommend broccoli or broccoli sprouts because they contain something called sulforaphane, and other vegetable like kale or Brussels sprouts are good too. But I would not recommend red wine even though it contains resveratrol because it is alcohol. Alcohol can disrupt your sleep and that can go against your gut resetting and autophagy activation. Also, alcohol can feed harmful bacteria. Okay, so what not to eat for dinner then? So red wine is one, but are there other foods that you should not eat? Yes, anything sugary like a cake and ice cream. Therefore, no dessert after dinner. It is the worst timing to eat dessert. If you really must to eat something sweet, then eat it after lunch. You can have a dessert after lunch. That's better because you kind of move around in the afternoon. But after dinner, basically you don't move so much. You just stay quiet and then you go to bed. So it can raise your blood sugar level. Plus, it can feed harmful bacteria in your gut. So you want to avoid it for pre-fasting meal. And steak because it can feed harmful bacteria, but also it takes longer to digest. Steak is very heavy. It takes a long time to digest. That means you will not be in a fasted state much later. Probably you won't be in a fasted state until you wake up the next morning. You will miss your precious sleeping time. And if you want to eat something meaty, then eat fish. Fish takes much shorter time to digest. The next one is chicken, like lean chicken, such as chicken breast, or thinly sliced lean meat if you don't eat beef. And then finally steak. So the steak takes the longest time to digest. Next, thinly sliced lean meat, and then lean chicken, and finally fish. So fish is the best, lean chicken the second best, thinly sliced lean meat is the third best, but steak is the worst one to have for this purpose. And green tea, which is kind of surprising because green tea contains catechin, but it also has caffeine, which can disrupt your sleep. So you can have green tea in the morning or maybe up until lunchtime, but not for dinner. So let's look at Japanese dinner. This is the kind of dinner that people may have. I mean, of course, each person has different sort of things for dinner. But miso soup is one thing people always have. I'm sure most Japanese people have miso soup for dinner. And then we often have mushrooms like shiitake. So both are spermidine rich. And then we may have salmon or other kind of fish, not always salmon, but usually some kind of fish. If we have salmon, that means astaxanthin. But not natto. Most people don't have natto for dinner. People usually have natto for breakfast. We usually have some kind of tsukemono, like a fermented vegetables. And then a lot of vegetables, in this case, like broccoli, it's called sulforaphane. So some of the autophagy activating foods and a lot of fiber, which can contribute to gut reset. But one thing about Japanese dinner is some people drink green tea after dinner, so it's not perfect. But we don't usually have a dessert after dinner. We don't have a custom of having dessert after dinner. So we don't eat anything sweet. So it's not perfect, but generally speaking, it is pretty good. It is pretty good meal to have before your overnight fast. So that means you don't need to make it perfect. Again, you don't need to be too neurotic about exactly what type of food you should have and so on. You can relax a little bit. The bottom line is whether you are eating breakfast for dinner, you just eat mago wa yasashii koku, which means beans, nuts and seeds, seaweeds, vegetables, fish, mushrooms, tubers, whole grains, and fruit and fermented food. So eat mago yasashi koku and fermented foods, and you should be fine. And eat wide variety of food from each category. Eat diverse beans, diverse nuts and seeds, diverse seaweeds, and so on. So diversity is the key because you need different kind of fiber to feed different kind of bacteria in your gut. So eat mago yasashi koku and fermented food. Now, for the details of my evening routine, please read chapter 9, my 80% optimal biohacking routine in Live Wiser, Not Smarter. Okay, summary. To optimize 12-hour fast, what you do around your fast is important and have dinner as early as possible. Practice hara hachibunme. Eat gut-friendly food like fiber and fermented food. Eat foods that can activate autophagy, such as natto, salmon, shrimp, and broccoli sprouts. Avoid drinking red wine and green tea, even though they contain autophagy-activating resveratrol and catechin. Avoid eating steak because it takes longer to digest. Don't have dessert after dinner. Eat mago wa yasashi koku. Okay, that's it for today. Thank you for watching. Again, my name is Hachiaki Takamiya, the author of Live Wiser, Not Smarter. If you like this video, please give me your thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And please leave your comment. What do you eat for dinner to optimize your fast? Now, I talked about natto. The natto has so many health benefits. And I say there was a video explaining that benefit, which is this one.